wanted to talk about one of the most important tools that you have as a jazz improviser playing changes, and that's something called the 2-5 relationship. So what do I mean by the 2-5 relationship? Well, this term really comes from 2-5-1s. So if I have a 2-5-1, I have the chords in a 2-5-1, which are D minor, G7 and C major, are named or numbered after the scale position. So for instance, in the case of a C major scale, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 2 is a D, C, D, E, F, G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is a G, and then 1 is obviously a C. So D minor, G7, C major. Now the important thing for this video that we're interested in is the 2-5, which is the D minor, G7 relationship. Now, that interval relationship is either a descending perfect fifth or an ascending perfect fourth. And it's really important that you get to know this relationship in every key. So there's obviously 12 different ones. So you want to know, C minor and F7 go together. You want to know that D7 and A minor go together. You want to know that D minor and G7 are going to go together, right? And C7 is going to go with G minor, okay? I'm saying minor. I mean, I was playing minor sevenths there, but as we'll see in a minute, that can actually be any sort of minor chord that you want, okay? That relationship is very flexible and very powerful. Okay, so if we look at the basic 12-bar blues, you can see that if I put the chart for that up here, we already have a couple of 2-5 relationships. So for instance, in bar 4, we have this relationship D minor, G7, right? And later on we have A minor, D7, okay? These are typical for sort of bop and post-war jazz. They kind of add a bit of movement into things. You can choose as a player whether you want to play these or not. For instance, people who are devotees of Barry Harris and his way of teaching would probably ignore the 2 chord and focus on the dominant. On the other hand, about Pat Martino or somebody like that, and many other guitar players might choose to emphasize the 2 chord. I've done some videos on that elsewhere. So what I say, and actually if you look at the scales and everything, then the 2 and the 5 are kind of both, like D minor and G7 are both part of the G dominant scale that I've talked about in my last cookbook video. So that relationship is within the scale, okay? So it's really just a matter of perspective which you choose. They're kind of the same thing, whether you choose to view it as a D Dorian or a G Mixolydian or dominant scale, depending on what name you prefer. Now, one thing I don't like about modern chord scale theory is often we think of those as being separate scales, and I think that's actually incredibly unhelpful. Okay, it's better if you just think of one or the other. I mean, then it's just one thing to think about, and not 2 things. Okay, so but that 2-5 relationship, I mean, every jazz educator would tell you that it's an important thing. It's just they might think about it in a different way. So, in a very simple way, I just want to take our 12-bar blues. And I want to apply something to it. So we've got the dominant chords, obviously. We've got our G7, C7. We've all got this D minor. And then C7. If you remember from the chord tones video that I did. So we've got that basic thing. But we can also add or replace these chords with the 2 or the minor chord. And Barry Harris, by the way, calls this the important minor, which is another simple name that I really like. So for instance, on a G7, we can play D minor. Let's use a D minor triad for now. It creates a different colour. G minor on the C7. Adding a ninth there, which is a nice thing to do with a triad. Adding a second or a ninth to that chord, there's no time that doesn't sound good for this thing. This is a great thing to do, and this gives you a little bit more variety if you should want that. But you can just play the straight arpeggio as well. Might not sound like the blues just yet, but I'll play a backing track with it, and you'll hear it in a second. And then the A minor. We're going to ignore the E7 for now because that's kind of more of an altered sound. So we're not going to make a big deal of that. We're just going to play the E major, as we did in the previous video. Well, that's 2-5 already, right? Okay, and then play the turnaround as before. And I'm going to give you an idea of what those colours kind of sound like, because very often if we play too much of the dominant chords, it can just sound a bit, vanilla and boring. And it's nice to have this as an alternative colour, which kind of helps it sound a bit cooler. Okay, have a listen anyway. Okay. If I mix them up together. Can hear that moves us some way towards having more colours. I mean, I can do it on my own as well without the backing track. So, see? So it kind of adds a little bit more. You've got a little bit more to play with there. Now, where this gets quite interesting is when we start to add in extra notes. So I've already talked about adding in the second, for instance, or the ninth. That's a great sound. If you add in the fourth, you get perhaps more of a pentatonic-y sort of sound. In fact, you could use the whole pentatonic scale. Let's just do that actually. So I'm going to use a pentatonic scale, particularly for the C minor, the G minor, because that sounds particularly good. But maybe also for the G7 as well. Sorry, rushing a bit. So that's a quick win you've got right out of the box, right? As a guitarist, everybody knows the minor pentatonic scale, so you can use it like that. As the important minor, D minor pentatonic on the G7, C minor pentatonic on the C7, and so forth, right? That's a really good one. Now, it gets a little bit interesting if we can use the minor seventh, which is obviously closely related to the minor pentatonic. That has a kind of floating sound. Kind of a little bit more sort of, kind of suspended maybe, floating, a little bit cooler. So there's that. Now, if we use a minor sixth, which is kind of Charlie Christian's favourite move, we're adding a B to that. And then we've got very much that third in the dominant chord. So it sounds a lot more dominant chordy using a D minor sixth as opposed to a D minor seventh. Have a listen to this. Kind of old school, I think. Certainly pointing you more in that sort of swing direction, swing era direction. You can put half steps between these notes as well. That really helps to sort of open up the possibilities. And of course, you can use your lower neighbour tones I've talked about in one of my other videos, the one with chord tones in it. So this sort of thing. By the way, that if you put the important minor or the 2 over the 5, so D minor 6th on the G7, what you actually get is more of the G minor 9th sound, sorry, G9 sound, beg your pardon, which is basically the D minor 6th has all the notes of the G9 chord except for the G, and that makes it a really, really good choice if you want to get that kind of nice open dominant sound. Okay, if we want to go a little bit further out though, we can use the minor major seventh, and this is pushing us now more towards melodic minor mode territory. So if I do this, then basically the simplest way of doing that is taking the major seventh of the minor chord and adding it to the chord tones. So instead of playing a D minor, I'm now playing D minor with a C in it, C sharp in it as well. If I play that, it kind of has a much more exotic sound. You see what I mean? I'll tell you, so just a tiny bit outside, and that's what melodic minor harmony is really good for. In fact, what you'll find in many bebop lines is actually that they'll just mix things up. For instance, here's a Dizzy Gillespie line from Groovin' High, and so we've got the major seventh in there, the C sharp. We've also got the C natural, and we've got the ninth in there as well, by the way, or the second. And it goes to a G chord, which is also the sixth of the D minor. So hopefully you can see already how that actually relates to real world bop language. It really is this simple. It just is chord tones and passing tones a lot of the time. And the passing tones can come from either the chromatic scale or the diatonic major and minor scales. So with that in mind, I'm just going to play over the progression again, using these minors and moving between the minor sixth, the minor seventh, and the minor major seventh, joining them all together. That's getting us well into bebop territory now, right? If you think of things like, things like that, or I'm trying to, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but these little lines that kind of join up, minor sevenths with major minor sevenths and minor sixths, and you transcribe and you learn bebop heads and things, you'll notice this stuff all over. It's not like they just use the melodic minor on its own. It's that they mix it up with the other scales. But if you do want to play the melodic minor modes, that's very obvious, right? If we want to play that nice melodic minor sound on the G7, we obviously have the D minor, and we just put the melodic minor on that. I mean, it's going to sound a little bit crazy to use it on every single chord, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's not something I would tend to do that much, but it's a good exercise. But in sparingly used, it can be very effective. I particularly like that particular sound on the 4 chord. Charlie Parker used it a lot there. Okay, here we go. Doesn't sound quite so good on the 1 chord, so I'd probably do something a little bit more similar. And here. Okay. So yeah, it's a little bit of spice, if you like. You might not want to use too much of it, but a little bit of spice sprinkled in there with the regular stuff will just bring it to life a bit more. The last thing I should very quickly talk about is the tritone substitution. If you don't know what a tritone substitution is, maybe don't watch this bit. But for instance, if I'm going from a G7 and I use the tritone substitution of a D flat 7 going to C7, then I can use the same relationship. I can then use, like for this chord D flat 7, I can use A flat minor getting to C7, right? So let's keep it simple. Let's use just a simple minor major 7th arpeggio. It's a ninth in there as well, but you know, don't say anything about that. Okay, and we're going to give that a go. There we go. We're going to do the same thing here. Right, now, so therefore I was playing the altered scale, right? So you can go really a long way just by using the simple relationship. The tritone substitution is another very simple substitution, which I'm going to talk about in another video. So those two subs together give you the altered scale, right? It's kind of cool. If you're a Barry Harris aficionado or acolyte, or is acolyte the right word? If you're into the way he teaches, then you might be wanting to use something like the minor sixth diminished scale. And this stuff is all very much in the Barry Harris ballpark. For instance, he talks about the important minor, as I've mentioned before. D minor is the important minor of G7, and the tritones minor, D flat 7, is a tritone substitution of G7, and then the tritones minor would be, probably for him, A flat minor 6, right? So this is all great stuff to use, and hopefully you can see we've already got quite a bit of spice we can use, even though we've only done 3 videos. So I hope you enjoy this and have fun playing around with that, and be on the lookout for it in actual real music. Thanks for watching.